This might be easier for people, right? This would be easier. That way you can just talk like this. It'll just be here. You click here for the next slide. Boom, like that. Does that work for you?
To bring my little camera, I forgot.
You can stand if you want. Would you, or is it comfortable to sit?
I'll probably stand.
Okay, I can move this out here then.
Let me see what size this is. I'll say it'll stand. I can make it lower.
If you change your mind, you know where to find it. Hi, everyone. We're going to be starting in A couple minutes. So if you want any coffee or tea or water, now is the time.
I'm gonna read just a quick their little bio. Whatever you want.
Okay, everyone. We're going to start now. We are live streaming, so that doesn't really mean anything for you, but thanks for tuning in if you're at home. First off, we have Meryl Meisler. We're very excited. By the way, I'm Sarah Danziger. I'm the education coordinator here, and I do a lot of stuff in the digital lab. So if you ever need some one-on-one help, I would be the one to do that. I'm just going to read a little bit about Meryl real quick in case you don't already know. Meryl was born in 1951 in the Bronx and raised on Long Island, New York. Inspired by Diane Arbus, she enrolled in photography class at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Moving to New York City in 1975, she studied with mentor Lisette Modell, continuing to document life with her quirky eye. While frequenting legendary discos, punk clubs, and go-go bars, Meisler captured hedonistic havens, celebrities, and revelers of the night, never revealing these and other large bodies of unseen work until retiring from her 31-year career as a New York City public school art teacher. Her books, A Tale of Two Cities, Disco-Era Bushwick, Paradise, Sassy 70s, Suburbia, The City, and New York Paradise Lost, Bushwick-Era Disco are internationally acclaimed. In 2021, CPW exhibited Meryl's show, New York Paradise Lost, and was a recipient of CPW Affinity Award. Her first solo museum exhibition opens in May 2023 at Zillman Museum. Meryl currently lives in New York City and Woodstock, continuing her photographic memoir, begun in 1973, a uniquely American story, sweet and sassy, with a pinch of mystery. Clamp represents her work.
Thank you. I am so surprised to see a full audience on a threatened snowstorm night. No, you're really brave. Just curious, who here still has their first camera? Right? Sentimental. Yeah, this is mine. And I do have it. I'll talk more about it. And anyone here identifies as a photographer or has an addiction? Okay. Thank you. So we all have our influences why we do what we do. My dad, Jack Meisler, was a printer by trade, but he's a really good photographer. And I have his negatives. Here's one of his early self-portraits as a Coast Guard, and then leaving the Coast Guard. But my dad had his dad, Jack Meisler. I'm sorry, Murray, my grandpa Murray. And I literally, every time I ever saw my grandfather, he had a light meter in my face. He was always photographing. And I think in my entire life, I saw one of his photographs. And it's kind of like, there's just a few snapshots, but he was always photographing. And it's said that he built his own tintype camera and carried it around everywhere. And I realized from when we heard the Vivian Meyer story, I understood it, because it didn't even matter if you ever saw the photographs. It was the act of photography was just enough. It's how we related. So I got that adventure camera at age 7, and my subjects were like, this is the house I grew up with, my little brother. I took a picture like my dad would take of the little brother. I photographed friends on the street, trips. The same subjects have stayed with me my entire life. Family, friends, places you go. School. Okay. And then in 1972, 50 years ago, I went to the MoMA retrospective of Dion Arbus. And I think I was just going to MoMA, and I ended up seeing that show, and it moved me. I felt something. And I was going off to school that year for graduate school. My undergraduate was in Buffalo State in art education. And I thought, got to get your master's anyway. I heard they have a photography program. I might as well learn how to use a real camera. And I enrolled in a photography class taught by Cavalier Ketchum. And he was the only photography teacher. So every semester was the same thing. And I started this addiction. But Cavalier showed the work of many documentary photographers. Slide presentations. I was very inspired by the work of Jacques-Henri Lartigue, who is a French photographer who grew up in an aristocratic family at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, and he photographed his friends and family just being themselves. They're actually his childhood photographs that weren't revealed until years later, or were revealed to the public. And I thought they hit a chord because it was so funny and loving and delightful. Another photographer who influenced me was the work of Brazil, seeing the photographs of the nightlife of Paris and same-sex clubs and prostitutes and all. I was intrigued. What can I say? The work of Lisette Modell, who was the mentor of Dion Arbus. The snapshot aesthetic, the vernacular photograph spoke to me. So when I went home, you'll see later, I started photographing friends and family. That was my instinct, inspired by them. 1975, I moved to New York City, even though I was certified to teach. I was scared to teach, and I became a freelance illustrator. Now, we're storytellers, right? Photographers, we are storytellers, but I also could draw very well. And I moved to this house on 63 West 92nd Street, which is a cousin's building, subletted a room there, and then she let me build a dark room in the laundry room. I went with the intention of auditioning to take a class with Lisette Modell. And once she was accepted me, that was it. I moved in and started photographing. I photographed, like, if it's a house, I just carried my camera, a medium format camera, and photographed the kids on the street, whatever I saw. The tree across the house, that tree's still there. And I developed a film up in the little laundromat, when someone else wasn't doing their wash. And I was at 1977. Just, it's kind of a memoir. I was 1975. I came out, and I was coming out. Moved to New York, and in 77 went to my first Pride Parade. I'm a member of the synagogue now and have been for a long time. So things go into your brain and your heart. I realize for me, it's in retrospect, I don't go to photograph. I photograph where I'm going. It's like an ongoing memoir of select moments. But most of my work was I didn't even have time to print it or develop. I just developed it. And just a few years ago, for the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, I was doing a story for Vice magazine, then and now, photographing, and I just looked through my negatives, and thank goodness they're organized. I was able, and even then, I scanned this picture just because I thought it should be part of the story because I saw a beautiful person. I didn't realize that was Marsha P. Johnson, even now, then nor now. So I think it's always the intentions has been to photograph people I found uplifting. But I was also, as a young person who was a freelancer, I was also going out a lot because I didn't have to get up in the morning. And I met a friend, Judy Jupiter. We met each other in 1977 at Mardi Gras, and came back and realized we both liked clubbing. And here, Studio 54. The main idea was to go out. The camera was secondary. Major event. We all have major events that happen in our lives. I didn't know it, but July 77 was the New York City blackout. That night, Judy and I were invited by one of our owners of Studio 54 to go to a private party. And I'd never been at the private parties. I heard about those rooms. And I couldn't even imagine what they were like, knowing what the big rooms were like. And we go to go out, and there's no lights. No lights on the street. There's no subways not running. It's dark. And so we got on our bicycles and went down to Studio 54, knocked on the door. There's nothing. It's like, oh. And the next day heard that this was the big blackout. And and you saw the news reports, heard about a neighborhood called Bushwick in Brooklyn that was rioting and tearing up the place and fires and looting. And my family's from the Bronx. It didn't hit me. That just sound like some kind of hellhole that I would have that I really had no relationship to, but it existed. You heard about this neighborhood, Bushwick. I had one period of my life where I made a living as a photographer. From 1978 to 79, I was a CETA, the Comprehensive Employment Trading Act. It was like the WPA of the 70s. And I used photographs I took of my family in Long Island and friends who a majority were Jewish, as I am. And I was hired by the American Jewish Congress to document Jewish New York. And my personal project was to research and find out more about my own roots. So here, for example, is the Lower East Side Street Festival. During the time of CETA, you had to do community service. I chose to teach for my community service because I had this teaching degree and I really wasn't using it because I was afraid. And I taught kids, homebound handicap. I was building up my confidence. So here's some of the work I did for CETA, produce a portfolio of prints. And even at the time, there were two other photographers working for CETA, and one was a member of the Orthodox community, and the other one, his subjects were more, people would pay us hats, really Torahs. Mine were like, people don't look Jewish. They look like me. But now I see in retrospect, I guess we kind of do. And then I love this. One of the things I like about New York, that this still exists. You can go to Purim. It's coming up in March or April. It's around 10 like Mardi Gras, and go to Williamsburg or other Hasidic neighborhoods. And it's the only time you really can walk around and feel welcome, because it is like Mardi Gras. And I was just there this past spring, and it was the same day. After CETA ended, well, I'd gotten used to a steady paycheck. As a freelance illustrator, it was always the check is in the mail, but the bills were there then and now. And I decided to use this portfolio of work I do with students during CETA to get a steady job. But there's a little something on the side. While I was also during CETA, I wasn't just going out at night because that $10,000 salary really was like, I was rich. I got a real bed. And the disco scene was getting kind of seamy. You know, some of the stories you've heard, a lot of them are true. And like my friend Judy got a job as a bartender at a go-go bar. I thought it was fascinating. Here's the little brassard in my head. I thought it was really fascinating. And the music was the same, the go-go bar, the disco music, and it was intriguing. So I asked him, the manager, if I get a job, and I became a hostess, meaning escorting people in from the door to the stage and getting tips. And here's the sad thing. I never had so much money in my life. And occasionally, and I worked in these bars on and off for 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And I would draw what I saw. And then eventually I bring my camera because I was going somewhere else. And so I wasn't an outsider. How's that? So that's a self-portrait. And that's Stacy walking down the stairs with her tips. But so I became a school teacher. At first, the paychecks weren't coming into school teachers, so I was still working at the go-go bars on weekends. And I realized I better stop. You know, I certainly could lose my job. I couldn't use the excuse of not getting the paycheck. It's my classroom. You can see my painting skills, right? I was always trying to get out of teaching. I took scenic design, tried to get into a union. Oh, sorry. And in that career, you take what you do and you love, you do it well. Why not? That's the only way I had power. I'm an artist and teach kid art. And I end up getting my students work in the Whitney Biennial and the New Museum and Dia Art Foundation. And okay, I became a national award-winning teacher. But it was really hard work. And any teachers in any public school or K through 12 teachers in the group? No, it's a Thursday night. You couldn't even be out now. So this is what I saw outside the window from school. This is literally looking outside the school. I found myself teaching in Bushwick. Because first I was part-time for 2 years at something called Learning to Read to the Arts, but I was on a waiting list to get a full-time job with benefits because I've always wanted stability, health care, sick days, things like that. And I was appointed to Bushwick. And when I got the letter saying I could go up, that there's a job available for me, it kind of said, you go for the interview, and you could accept the job if it's offered, but if you turn it down, I would lose my chance to getting a full-time position off the waiting list. So I accepted the job. But this is what it looked like. It was a long. I taught in Bushwick for 14 years. I ended up really liking it. Then I took a sabbatical. And my last 15 years was at a progressive school in Manhattan. 2010, I retired. And my photographs of Bushwick are what really saved me, because it's a long story, but somebody reached out to me about proposing for a show at the Brooklyn Historical Society, and they couldn't find any photographs of Bushwick, about the changes of Bushwick of 77, 2007. They couldn't find any photographs other than about the blackout. And a former colleague said, contact Miss Meisler. She was always taking pictures. So long story short, I started showing my Bushwick work. First in Manhattan, first at Brooklyn Historical Society, then at Soho Photo, and then I wanted to be part of Bushwick Open Studios. I'm in the bathroom, the restroom doing my lipstick of a place called Bazaar, a drag burlesque bar in Bushwick, and I had an epiphany. That's me having an epiphany. I realized there's a disco ball overhead. There's a disco ball at a dance floor. The place was packed. It was pumping. It was exciting. It's like, wow, when I was in the 70s, 1970s, if you looked or acted like you were a bridge and tunnel crowd, you weren't even allowed in the best clubs. No through the red gates. And now the hot scene was in Bushwick. And I just realized I couldn't verbalize it, but my worlds collided. I knew something collided. And the person who owned the bar actually had offered me to have a show in a basement space in the bar, saying you want to show my work. And when he first judged me, he had photographs of his own work on the wall in this black space there. I said, well, how's it going showing your work? Because he's a filmmaker. He said, well, it's fine, but it is a bar. People do get drunk. And sometimes they rip the work off the wall and steal it. And I went upstairs and spoke to a collaborator, a writer that I was working with, having some shows at Bushwick with. I said, this is great. I've had my work in real galleries, even museums. And now the owner of a drag burlesque bar in Bushwick wants me to show my work in the black room basement where people get drunk and steal the work off the wall. And she looked at me and she said, don't be such a snob. And I thought about that. Well, that drag burlesque bar in Bushwick named Bazaar didn't just give me a show, because I had, offered me a show, and when I saw the disco night that was so, the club night that was so much fun, I went up to the owner. I said, how's it going with the basement with showing work? He said, oh, it's good. It's better. We figured it out. We bolt the photographs to the wall. So I said, well, you still interested in giving me a show in the spring for Bushwick Open Studios? He said, of course, it's history. Okay. He didn't know that I had this idea that I'm going to put my Bushwick and disco work together. I didn't even tell him. I just do it. Then we met, and he tells me during a snowstorm, let's make a book. I say, what do you mean a book? He's like, let's make a book. I said, he didn't know I was applying to real publishers to have books. And it was February. The show was in June. It's like, nothing gets done that fast. I said, well, I don't want to just show my Bushwick work. I want to show my disco work as well. It's a long story, but they go together because my world collided. And I started making I was familiar with my Bushwick photographs. Okay, he said, well, first he said, disco, really? I said, yes, I really was part of the disco scene. And he said, well, can I see your work? I said, well, I have to scan it. I've never shown it to anyone. And I started putting together samples and emailing it, and he got it. And we ran with it. My spouse, my wife, Patricia O'Brien, she's a web designer. Okay, she'll design the book. I just figured, whatever it is, I'll humor them. I'm just going to go with it because it takes as much work, it felt like, to put together a book as to put together a show. We did it. We did it in 4 months. Published this book, and it became an international sensation. And the work got really a lot of attention. So when I taught in Bushwick, I didn't want to carry my medium format camera because I was scared about getting robbed. I had been robbed before, the year before, at another school. So I got a point and shoot. And just on my way to work and back, put in color slide film. Who had time to develop film anymore besides that? I didn't. If any full-time job, but believe me, teaching kids in a public school is a really hard work. And so I just photographed things I found interesting, enlightening, made me not want to quit my job on the way to and from school. And it hit, these are kind of combinations. I would look at a picture. I knew I was familiar with a lot of my Bushwick pictures. I was picking up my slide page, my negative pages, and going, oh, match. And so, the village people and the kids on the corner. It's the same. Well, second book. So it really got a lot of attention, and the book already paid for itself. And just like he said, let's do another one. I said, I know exactly what I want to do, because when people looked at my Bushwick work, they were surprised. They expressed that, like, people look like they're having fun. They're like enjoying themselves, or despite the background. And I said, I want to show where I come from. I come from a heritage of humor. Okay. And my concept was purgatory and paradise, sassy 70s suburban city, because I had this incident growing up in Long Island where I was told I could never go to heaven because I'm Jewish. Best I could do is purgatory. And I want to show my background, my influences, and then moving to the city. So this is probably one of my first family pictures with my medium format camera. It's my family at Rosh Hashanah. There's my dad at the table, my mom, my brother, my aunts and uncle, and then the clowns at the Ringling Brothers Circus. So the concept is Long Island and New York City. And it's all black and white. Again, one of my little cousins at that same Rosh Hashanah, and he's this guy's CBGB's. He's Steve Vader's, the lead singer of the Dead Boys. I saw him as just like a really amazing looking, fashionable guy, and I realized that he was the lead singer. And people on the internet, people will say, "Oh my God, that girl must hate that picture." And my cousin writes in, "I love that picture." And this is totally Lartigue. Okay, the same thing. I knew these are totally Lartigue influences. My parents belonged to something called a mystery club, and I can go on and on and on. But for decades, they would go 15 couples and go on mystery evenings, planned it with. I mean, they went to things like nudist colonies. They went to see space capsule being built. Imagine being 10 years old and your parents are hysterical, laughing in the morning. And what did you do? They went to some place called the Continental Baths. They went to a gay male bathhouse to watch a singer. So just a concept I could have my parents sitting around next to men in towels watching, a performer. These people knew how to laugh. And so I photographed the Mystery Club families. Parents and friends. Okay. Yes, it was purple. It was actually purple and green. Okay. And then one of my first disco experiences going on Valentine's Day, it was Coyote Hooker's Ball. Oh, sorry. Fire Island. Right. And then this is while I'm a Cedar photographer. I had a friend named Mr. Katz, a friend in his upper 90s. What is America? Okay. And then the latest book, which is actually 2021, and it was made possible by Center for Photography Woodstock, helped sponsor me for a grant for the Leonian Foundation. I love working with this director, the person who started Bazaar, Jean-Stéphane Sauveur. He's a French filmmaker. And we were working towards doing the next book together. When you find someone you communicate with, hold on to them. It's like you're speaking the same language. It's amazing. And the bar closed, the pandemic, his film projects closed. He said, I just can't commit to doing another one. Thank goodness I got the grant to help. Good luck. I'm doing this no matter what. He helped me edit it from beginning to end. What a friend, like what a deep influence. So I felt like there was the first book about disco era Bushwick. I held back some my best Bushwick work because I was applying to a real publisher. I also had to look through most of my work, and I had the opportunity to be a part of several nightlife shows like the Brooklyn Museum and Historical Society, and I'm like, look at this picture, look at this picture, look at this picture. I felt like this needed to be done. And so myself and my spouse, Patricia O'Brien, we became Parallel Pictures Press. And thank you for CPW for sponsoring me, because if I didn't have this little mini grant, or it's not so many, but to help pay for the expenses, I might not have gone through with it. But I needed to. Some things, usually you remember doing self-portraits, but the one of myself as a go-go girl, I didn't remember this one. And I'm looking through the sides of Bushwick, and I see on the slide, October 24th. And I realized, that's my birthday. And so I look closer, oh, that's me with my little camera on my way to work. That's Bushwick High School. This is Ron Galella, a very famous paparazzi. I wasn't a paparazzi, never been a paparazzi, but I seem to be able to be walking into anywhere. And of course, in this book, what makes it different from the first book, besides the fact that it's a lot smarter, it's really conceptually, it's a much stronger book. I bring the viewer inside the classroom, because if I wasn't a teacher there, I wouldn't have been there, right? And if you're a teacher, most of the time I did not photograph the students because classroom management is really hard. And the photographs I'd want to take were not behaviors I want to elicit. And so I would like pictures of kids at work. But I actually ended up teaching photography there. Okay. It's stuck. Sarah, help. Ah, thank you. She's really good. Thank you. So again, the fashion. Oh, and the kids, I mean, it looked like what you saw what the neighborhood looked like, right? The kids were so into how they presented themselves. They were so on the cutting edge of fashion, culture, music. They would make fun of me because I didn't wear designer jeans. And looking through the slides, it's like, oh yeah, it's my homeroom class, and we're having a holiday party, and I caught this little picture. And when this was on they did an article at the New Yorker magazine, New York, the big one. New Yorker, the literary one. And this got so many comments like, how could she do this? It's like, I snapped the picture. I said, kids, break it up, not in the classroom. I don't know if you're aware of a photographer, Arlene Gottfried. This is Arlene Gottfried. And we were friends. I mean, we are friends. She's in heaven, but we're friends. And I was certainly not the only photographer. Far from it. There were so many photographers out in the clubs, and was very surprised by the reaction that my photographs would be any different than anybody else's. So you get an idea. This is the neighborhood cleaning up. I saw this happening. And my thought I saw this beautiful tree in the light. I said, Ansel Adams would have taken that picture. So I had signed out on my lunch break. You had to sign out of the building and brought my little camera and took a picture. But this is also a little idea of the history. That building. It's the police department in this, that's summer of 77 in July when there was a blackout and it was a, you know, a building up of frustrations. A few weeks later, there was two boys, actually brothers, playing in an abandoned knitting factory and, you know, lighting matches. Well, there were flammables in there and it blew and it blew and it blew. It was the largest fire in modern fire department in New York history until 9/11. And miraculously, no one died, but acres and acres of buildings were burnt out. And my school was on the edge of it. So that was like really a low point for this neighborhood. But it also, in retrospect, it was also a calling out, like for help. The Studio 54. And so these are the kind of things I like playing with, looking for connections. But also, you know, books are different. It's like how it's a moving sculpture, how it goes forward, backwards. And my former gallerist, I've been very fortunate that someone, Stephen Casher, who had a big gallery, he saw my books at my second book, and he said, "I can't get your work out of mine," and he took me on because I was really nobody, and he advised me to use this one for the cover. It didn't need a disclaimer. In fact, when I ran it, because by the time I did this third book, you know, I knew curators who respected my work, and I have some really edgy pictures in there, really that I never thought I could show. And I just went to them, you know, like you have a question, a big question. And one of my main questions I'd ask them, you know, to let them know that there are some really questionable images because they're outrageous in a very sensitive way. And I said, is it photography or is it pornography? Because I needed it to be photography. So it had to pass that test. But I figured putting that one on the cover would let someone know it's not for children. And some of these people are famous. This is like a famous, there was Mark Stevens. He was a famous porn star or also pornographer. He was also known as Mr. 9.5, not for his shoe size. And he was a subject of Robert Mapplethorpe. Was very lovely, like a photograph like this. So many people in the Bushwick photographs have come forth. Like I started getting a lot of chatter on Instagram about this picture. And at my opening at Clamp Gallery in Chelsea, 3 of the children of these people or nieces and nephews came to the opening, and they said, "That's my uncle. That's my this. That's that." These 2 were my students, and they said, "You know, we tell our cousin or we tell our niece how wonderful their dad was," and they said, "You caught, you know, like you caught their spirit," and I was very moved that they were happy with it. So far, everyone who has come forth has been very pleased. And one of them I collaborated with it on several books. And I've also started naming the people in the books. Like this person's name is Patassa de Lafayette. And because why don't people know who Patassa is? Because she was such a force. Picasso would be on the arm of Salvador Dali. Picasso is the subject of Andy Warhol. Andy photographs Picasso's genitals. But you know what happened to Picasso? Don't know. Oh, and most of the kids from Bushwick of doing, alive and well. And as we know, many of the people from the disco era have some. There's less. They're older. There's also went through a different kind of, kids from Bushwick went through this poverty and crack, and then of course we're talking about AIDS. So here's the schoolroom, the classroom, not the classroom, the schoolyard. There were no parks for anyone to play in. And a club called Gigi Barnes. If I got rejected from the, say, studio that night because the doorman who liked us wasn't there, big deal. So you go to another club, and there's a Gigi Barnum's, which was a really, I don't think what the word was, but transgender people, performers and patrons. Theme parties, all white parties. Of course, there's no internet, so you got invitations or word of mouth. And I'm glad on my negative pages, thanks to a photographer named Ken Hyman, who told me how his system of ordering things was. And I wrote, kept things in chronological order, and I wrote notes on it. It was kind of like a diary. So I know the name of the club, the month, sometimes even the day, and certain people. A student, you see, this is my classroom. I'm teaching about perspective. I'm still trying to be an illustrator. It wasn't bad to be one of the guardian angels then. One of my students showing up in his outfit. Okay. So here's my friend Judy Jupiter. We're still friends. And of course, that's Grace Jones on opening night at a different club. But it's very nice because Judy's like, she's proud of the pictures of her. She shows them off to people. And she, not this summer, but the summer before, she's showing it off to a guy at a bar at Cherry Grove, Fire Island, her pictures. And he goes, "That's me." I said, "Was that really him?" He said, "Oh, yes, it was him." And he was a backup dancer for Grace Jones. And he said that these people made her career. It was like her publicist. We're actually doing a photography project here, like a day in the life of Bushwick entering the 90s. So hair culture, it's fashion. The teacher and kids in the gym discussing their moves, and then a contortionist performer. Makes sense to me. This is another Patou. I wonder what happened to her. She was a croupier, a blackjack dealer in Atlantic City. And I remember photographing this. I was attracted to this because it's a magnolia tree. And my mother loved magnolia trees in front of our house. So I just asked to do it. But you see how beautifully addressed the kids are. Really. Yep, it's good to be the king. And he was everywhere. It was but and I'm not if you're standing right next to somebody, like I didn't run up, it's like, "May I, Andy, take your picture?" And he did. And it seems this very rare photograph of him smiling. But there's a lot of really famous people that I didn't photograph because I want to be respectful of their space. Again, this is progress. They're cleaning up the cars. My school's up the block there, and they were just fun. It was dumping ground. Every day you'd come and like, new piles of cars just being dumped there. So they were cleaning out the cars. This is someone who's rejected from Studio 54. And so I like to play with things like the angles. It tells a different story. Doing a project with my students, learning about, I'm sorry, tricky finger. Okay. Okay, well, could this go back a little bit? Okay. Here, just as I love exhibiting things where they were taken. This summer, I had a exhibit in Cherry Grove, Fire Island, at the same ice palace, at the same place where this was photographed. Several of my photographs there for the summer, and that's special. Doing projects with the kids at the police station. Again, they're really breakdancing. It's like they knew the moves. You learned about it from them first. But some things don't leave you. Like, I'm very conscious. Like, this was a wild juxtaposition. Even though this kid is probably 50 years old, I mean, if it wasn't wearing a G-string, I would not put the picture next to them. Some people might say the leftovers, well, I think they were the Italian sisters. And drag queens at the Copacabana. Again, big industry, fixing cars. I recently scanned the picture next to this in here. It makes this one look mild. And then, something then now I realize I'm attracted to either things that look so typical, like this could be a Norman Rockwell recreation, or something I've never seen before. Anyone here familiar with Photoville? Okay, well, Photoville does public art installations, and I had a opportunity to exhibit this work on the school fence where I taught, and it's out now in the school. And so this photograph across from the way it was taken, and hearing all the stories about where these kids are now, very exciting. And they're very industrious then, and they're very industrious now. Judy, my friend Judy Jupiter, those are my handprints. You have whatever you do. What can I say? Hands-on learning, both places. And it's always been the thing. Cuts in budget, the first thing to go, right? And the teacher's lunchroom. My largest that I have yet to go through body of work is 36 years, the insider's view of the schools, public and private, because I was a public school teacher in New York City for 31 years, and I always took photographs. And then for 4 years after that, well, some adds up to 36, I was an adjunct at NYU supervising future art teachers, and I would visit the students at their student teaching situation and voluntarily photograph them for their portfolios. It was really, even just leaving the schools for 6 months and going back in, I realized there's things you see in schools that you don't see anywhere else. Okay. It's funny about what things look dated and don't. I mean, when I think of old people, old women with those little ladies with the blue hair. Well, now my friends have blue hair, and what style? Style is such a funny thing. This is like a only a teacher on lunch duty could do this, but some things haven't changed. Yes, this may not have those milk containers, but look at his shirt. Stop killing the black youth. Have we gone anywhere as a culture? And this was the day I was getting a very big teaching award, and a Newsday was coming to my classroom to interview and photograph me, and I opened the door and there's a love note, and the room is wrecked. The school's projects. My homeroom came in, they cleaned up really fast, and it wasn't until when I was looking through the book that I came upon this, and I cracked up. And I guess I cracked up then as well. And what's very sweet, I have a niece, Emily Meisler, and she's a teacher, and she wants this for her classroom as well. And no one has come forth to say, I did it. Like, you can't get in trouble anymore. You won't get detention. Tell me. No one's come forth. I have other ones that say, Miss Meisler sucks dick, like really school appreciation. This was another one that got buzz on the internet. Buzz, my uncle. So this boy, now a man, I've been in contact with him. And if you want to start a business that stays in business, still has Bushwick car service, the same telephone number, still works. At the time, I took this picture because it's very unusual then to have a shirt that said Bushwick and be proud of it. He was part of a team. Now it's like hip. So here's my Photoville installation. The photographs I took in Bushwick, in the schoolyard, around the block at the school, were on exhibit for like 6 months on that schoolyard fence. It was a perfect homecoming. And now the current principal curated them. And when I got to the final stages and she said, I'd like to see both books, like more of them. And I kept quiet. Then I said, you know what? I have to tell you, my books are not appropriate for children. And she was very formal because I said, should I call you Miss, or your first name? And he says, oh no, unless teachers are very close friends, we address each other by Mr. and Miss. I said, oh my God, she's not gonna, I better not tell her. And she said, Meryl, I checked you out. Don't worry, I know what to do. And so, and now those photographs are in the school permanent in the hallways, and that really makes me feel good. Proud. So you can see the installation. And they fixed up the schoolyard. Do I still photograph? And I've gone back to using the Norita camera. There's hardly anyone can fix them anymore. So now I have 4 bodies. 2 are going back out again today. I really just love it. And so this is a recent picture going out at night. Do I still photograph? Yes, I do. And it's because Center of Photography, the reason is sent me back into the dark room because I started having a gallery and showing my work, and Stephen Kasher Gallery was really just interested in my gelatin silver prints. And I also got to see how beautiful they were because when I did the inkjet prints, they look okay. They're not the same. Diamonds, rhinestones, it's not the same. And I learned in the other center on Tinker Street, Larry, who ran the darkroom, said, I'll help you get back. I just wanted to get back and learn how. So I thank you, Center for Photography Woodstock, for getting me back into the darkroom. And then in New York City, I live across from Fashion Institute of Technology. So I kept on enrolling in Photo 101 again and again and again to use the darkroom. And finally they said, we love you, Meryl, but we just can't keep taking the same class. And during the pandemic, CPW was no longer open. Couldn't use theirs. I couldn't use the lab at FIT or even sneaking on the weekends. I couldn't do anything. So I built a dark room in my basement at Woodstock and got advice from people at CPW. We just last week, 2 weeks ago, someone asked me if I see the same way. Yeah, yeah. It's like you see how you see. And so here is 1978, and this is like 2 years ago at the House of Yes in Bushwick, and it wouldn't even matter if it was film or not film. You see how you see. And what's very nice, I learned, because like I said, a lot of people in the disco scene disappeared. I got contacted by somebody who's doing a film about transgender people, performers from this back in the day in the 70s. And this person is still alive and well, but doesn't have any pictures of herself performing. And so I agree, yes, of course, use it in a film is historically important. And I'm going to the House of Yes this week. I'm going out again. It's ridiculous. Because then what? I don't know. Why not? And so this is bizarre when it was open. And a friend of mine, Madam Vivian V, was a drag queen and now performs other places. And when I was young, there was an older woman called Disco Granny. She was a woman in her upper 70s. Sally, I forgot her last name, and she was a widower. And just started when it was at all the clubs. She was all of 78 years old, and she was dancing the nights away. And I was thinking, having a ball. She even married a young man. And when I turned in my 30s, I was going, like, I don't want to be. People say I don't want to be the old man at the bar. I don't want to be the old lady at the discos. Well, now that I am in the same decade as Sally, I get it. And maybe not as often, but I'm going out again. Because it's fun. And then like I said, then my main reason was just to go out, and photography was secondary. I'm going with the intention to photographing now when I do. And so you can see, actually, so this is a show of my work in the basement of Bazaar and the performers. And I like photographing behind the scenes. And this was just a few months ago at the House of Yes in Bushwick. And I'm going to these Sunday night, they're now engaged, Lola and Chris. And I'm, okay, I'll wear a mask. I don't want to die, but I also don't want to, I want to do it. Current time, what's up? I have a show up in Paris. I have a show up in Paris. I just returned. Like that's really amazing. And tonight, gee, multitasking. Very tonight, there's an NFT launch with my work in it from a knifer thing, but I made a commitment here. So whatever, this is the first commitment. I got to be here. Hanukkah's coming. There's a saying you can't in Yiddish. You can't be in two nishtenen consonant. Something you can't be in two weddings with one backside. Well, you can do it through face. Do this one and it's hard, but it's good to have too many things to do, right? Thank you. Thank you, Lartigue. This is a total Lartigue influence. Okay, so important.
Wow, Meryl, that was amazing.
And I don't think we have later on questions because you have a second act, unless there are.
Yeah, I think we'll do a Q&A right now. We do have some people tuning in online, so maybe we'll start with the people.
And I have to. I want to be honest. I see very well, but I'm very hearing impaired. So if you say something, would you repeat it back?
Definitely,
I don't
yeah.
hear.
I'll hand this over to everyone. So do we have any questions here? We'll also tune into if anyone has any questions on the Facebook, we can relay those to you. But first we'll start with any questions we have in the house.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Meryl? No? Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'll let
It's
you think
okay.
about it.
It's fine. You can ask me later, or you shoot me an email. I'm an open book. Thank
No?
you.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention.
Meryl, I think you nailed it in your presentation. Oh, we have one question. We have one question. This is from Jane Levy Troy. Are you still photographing as much in black and white?
Do I still photograph?
In black. Are you still photographing as much in black and white?
Very good question. I have returned. Do I still photograph in black and white? I have returned to photograph in black and white. I realized I always loved it. Okay. Yes, I have my iPhone. I take pictures. The last time I shot film with I feel more intent when I'm using film. You know, like just so many arrows in that little bucket that you have, not doing thousands. And I love the way it looks. I love the traditional gelatin silver print. I think it's beautiful. If I shot in color, I wouldn't turn it into black and white and shoot it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meryl. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And thanks for keeping your commitment to me in CPW. We're going to take like a 2-minute break if anyone wants to use the restroom, get some coffee, water, tea, and then we will come back with Victoria Leonova. Please stay tuned, or if you're at home, we'll be back.